Hey, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Becoming Secure. This is your host, Emily, dating and relationship coach, specializing in all things attachment. And today we are talking about what makes situationships such a mind F. Keeping it a little clean, although I think I still have to mark this as explicit, even if I don't say the word. But if there are, little ears in the car, keeping it slightly cleaner. So, if you have been in this situation, you've been in a situationship, then you know what I'm talking about. These connections can feel so confusing, so hard to get over, so hard to make sense of. And you're like, but it wasn't even really like a relationship. It was just an almost sort of something. Why is it so, so addictive? So, like, why does it feel so intense? So, today we're talking about all these things. Like, why does it feel so intense? Why do you feel this like magnetic sort of pull towards this person where you like can't walk away? It's so hard to let go. You keep coming back. And why are they so hard to just make sense of or wrap your brain around? So today we're going to be unpacking that and hopefully taking a little bit of the shine, a little bit of the sparkle off of this connection that you have with this person to either empower you to be able to let go of them and walk away, to close the door, or to help you actually move on from this person if you've maybe already ended things, but you still find yourself ruminating, overthinking, all those things. So let's dive right in. Now, to just say it plainly, situationships are like playing with fire, okay? Just by nature, because you are allowing yourself to develop closeness or have intimacy, whether it's emotional or physical, with someone where there is no future, where it's a dead end. Or maybe you did something slightly different where you actually thought there was a future with this person, but you didn't get clarity first. Instead, you allowed yourself to develop feelings for them without having a conversation first about whether that person even wants the same thing. And so then once you finally do realize that you need to have that conversation, it feels so high stakes to do so because you already have caught serious feelings with this person. What happens if they don't feel the same and then things have to change? But at the same time, it's hurting you staying in this limbo, not knowing, where are we? What does he feel? What does he actually think about me? Does he want the same thing? So there's no way around the fact that with situationships, you're going to get burned. Okay. Um, unless you are both on the same page and you have that direct conversation and find out, okay, yeah, we both do want to progress things. But they seem really harmless on the surface or when we're first getting into them. It's like, oh, this will be fine. And and it's not. And or usually most of the time 99% of the time it's not, or even if it results in a relationship for like a very small percentage of people, you still went through a lot of emotional turmoil to get there. And there's totally a way that you can avoid that. Like you can have dating and relationships without all this uncertainty and emotional turmoil, and that's really what healthy relationships actually are like. That's what healthy dating feels like, where there's not all this up and down or all this confusion or uncertainty. And so, one thing that I really want to drive home is that even though you're not technically in a relationship, you are still experiencing the important key components of what makes something a relationship. You're just not calling it that. So I hope that this is sort of a mental permission slip that you are allowed to grieve this like it's a relationship, even though it doesn't have that label. Okay. Think about it. Relationships typically involve closeness, involve some sort of physical affection, whether you went all the way with this person or whether you didn't. or maybe just an emotional connection. My situationship that lasted like a year and a half, we were very, very emotionally intimate, but because of our faith, we were not physically intimate in any way. And so, sometimes there are those, you can have a situationship that leans more on the emotional side. And maybe that person's just like afraid of commitment, or, maybe you're afraid to have the conversation. Or you can have situationships that lean a lot more on the physical side, and there's not really the emotional intimacy happening. So, anyway, I say that not to be like, this is a situationship and this is not, or you can grieve this, but you can't grieve this one. No, my point is they can look a lot of different ways, but you're getting a lot of the important uh, pieces that make something a relationship, like physical or emotional intimacy or both, spending a lot of time together. Um, Going on dates, or essentially, like, maybe you're not calling it that, but you're doing all these different things together. They're essentially your person. And so even though it doesn't have the label, it doesn't mean that there wasn't the same like emotional impact there. So grieve it however you need to, and let it be okay that it doesn't have to be called something specific to still have an impact on you, to still have meant something to you, to still have hurt in the ways that it has and that it did. So, continuing on to what makes situationships so addictive and so hard to get over. We're going to talk about this from sort of a neuroscience lens, and then more of like an attachment wound kind of lens. These things overlap, but I'm going to separate them a little bit. So the first one would be this concept of intermittent reinforcement. So sometimes you get what you're hoping for from this person, sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes he's choosing you, sometimes he's texting you, sometimes he's reaching out, sometimes maybe when you're with him, you feel really close to him. You're getting what you want, but then when you're not with him, you don't have the certainty or the consistency or the label or the communication. So it's this back and forth, like you're getting what you want and then you're not. It's predictable, but then it's not. It's meeting your need and then it's not. And this means that in the moments when you do get the response that you want, where he's choosing you, he's with you, he's, cuddling you, he's opening up to you, you get an even bigger hit of dopamine. And this leaves you hanging on through all the turmoil, the uncertainty for more, because it feels like the reward is so, so big that it makes it worth it to hang out through all the difficult parts. And this is how all toxic relationships and inconsistent partners are. And it's also what makes something like gambling so addictive as well. The inconsistency makes that reward feel even bigger to your brain and worth sticking around for. But then something that is more stable and predictable won't give you that same dopamine. It's not as addictive. It's easier to walk away. So maybe you're like, why was it easier to get over my relationship of 2 years than it is to walk away from this situationship? That's because your relationship that maybe was healthier than this, or at least had more commitment, more stability, you kind of knew where the other person was, that isn't as addictive. There is that certainty. You're not getting as much dopamine from it. But you don't look at the gambler, for example, and say, oh, poor guy. His life without gambling would just be so boring. A life where he can handle his finances, where he can pay his bills, where he has control over his impulses. That must be so boring. And yet, this is kind of the mentality that we have about dating. If the guy doesn't leave you questioning where you're at, or doesn't give you these intense feelings, these intense butterflies, then like he's the boring one. So it's like, why do we label it that way, or that type of guy that way in dating? But we go for the exciting guy or whatever, the unpredictable one. But when we look at it in terms of like gambling and other types of addictions, We're not like, oh, living that sober life must be so boring. I mean, if you're actively in addiction, you're probably viewing it that way, where it's like, that's so boring. But if you're on the other side of it, like, I'm assuming most of you listening to this, probably the majority don't have a gambling addiction. And you're probably not thinking, wow, my life is so boring because I don't gamble. No, it's just normal to you. So it's the same thing with, relationships that are more steady and consistent, partners who are more predictable. They're just normal. But when we are addicted to the chase, to the inconsistency, it makes it, by comparison, seem like that stable person is boring. So the issue is that the intermittent reinforcement, that unpredictability, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, is addictive, and it hijacks your brain's reward system to where you will chase things or people that are self-destructive just for the dopamine that they give you. Okay. So that's exactly what's happening with your situationship. It hurts, it's confusing, it's up and down, back and forth. But when in the moments where he's choosing you, you're getting such this hit of dopamine. So you're sticking around through it. And so part of maturing is recognizing that inconsistent guys will kind of hook you in this way. And it's your responsibility to notice if that is his nature. Notice when you've entered a dynamic with someone like that and recognize, this actually isn't like that this person is so amazing and feels so good. It's just that they're inconsistent. The situation is uncertain. They're just giving me more dopamine. And so it's gonna, not be worth it in the long run. You have to say no to that sort of short-term gratification, right? Healthy guys won't give you as much dopamine, but that's not a bad thing. That's the nature of healthy relationships. Similar to how like sex with a normal human being won't give you as much dopamine as porn will. But that doesn't make porn better than real human connection. In fact, it's quite the opposite and very destructive. And there's a lot of research on how porn actually negatively impacts our relationships. And people who become addicted to porn tend to prefer that over your regular human relationships, human connections. So there are things that are worth looking for in relationships, worth striving for other than the dopamine hit. Things like emotional safety, long-term compatibility, alignment of your core values, right? The ability to resolve conflict with this person and to validate each other's feelings. Dopamine heavy connections riddled with inconsistency can only give you happy moments amidst a lot of anxiety and chaos and uncertainty. Stable relationships can give you a happy life. Okay. So do you want just the few and far between happy moments? Or do you want the happy life, the happy long-term relationship, the guy that you can build a life and a family with? Now, let's take this one layer deeper and look at it through more of an attachment lens, because it's not just enough to understand the neuroscience or the mechanism of why these relationships are addictive. We also need to understand what draws us back to them on an emotional level again and again and again, because that's where the healing really happens. Based on what I said about how it works with the dopamine, you're probably just like, okay, great. So I just need to kind of turn away from the connections like that. But it's not that simple, right? I'm sure if you have dated any sort of like, if you have any sort of patterns of dating guys who are inconsistent, who are maybe more avoidant in nature, or the guys who come on strong and they pull away, then you know that it's not as simple as just being like, okay, walk away. Sometimes it is, but there's actually deeper layers here. So situationships and even like inconsistent connections of all different kinds, whether you're, dating someone who's very avoidant or maybe someone who's narcissistic, and you're getting whether it's closeness, connection, consistency, or perceived consistency for one moment or a period of time, and then it's taken away. Those things hit on some big core wounds around worthiness. And this could sound like a lot of different things. So, a big one that often comes up with situationships is this fear that you're not worth choosing. Okay. So then you might be doing all these behaviors. I made a kind of a weird little reel the other day. You can go watch it if you're intrigued, where I was like demonstrating this with cat toys and talking about how when you are doing all these things to try to convince the guy to be with you, like you're like doing this dance essentially where it's like, hey, look at how I am so chill with whatever you want. I'm so like on your terms. Look at how much I do for you. Maybe it's like, look at how good I look in this dress. Look at how available I am for you, all these different things. It's, proving yourself. This is a sign that you are operating out of some feeling of unworthiness. So it's like if I do more or look a certain way or act a certain way, then I will be worth choosing by you. Another way this could sound is, this fear that you're not good enough. Okay, maybe I can do all these things to prove to him that I'm good enough to commit to. Or so look at the ways that you're kind of performing, or you're going above and beyond, or you're being so okay with his terms, even if deep down it might be providing you with more anxiety, or confusion, or it just doesn't make you feel good about yourself. So another way that kind of the worthiness wounds might sound like are this fear that there's something wrong with you on some deep level. Could be a fear that you're too much, or a fear that you're not worth committing to, which is, kind of the same as not worth being chosen. And this is why he won't commit to you. Okay, so on a subconscious level, it feels like his actions, him not committing, means something about you. So when he's choosing you, it feels like you are worthy. It feels like you are good enough. It feels like you aren't too much. And maybe it feels like someone will actually stay, actually love you, value you, all those things. But then in the moments where he's not showing up, where he's not giving you that validation, that reassurance, it feels like all those things are at stake. It feels like your greatest fears and insecurities are coming true. And that can give you super intense feelings. That can make you latch on to him. That can make you then jump into performance mode where it's like, okay, no, I've got to do more. I've got to, act even more chill. I've got to, um, it could be so many different things. And so the important thing when you're reacting from this place is to recognize that the intense feelings and the intense, connection that you have with this person, they really aren't about how great he is, and they aren't about how great of a fit the two of you guys are. The intensity is about familiarity. I'm going to say that again. The intensity is about familiarity. He triggers your core wounds about your worth or just about relationships in a similar way to the people who created those core wounds. So usually this is mom and dad, right? They're the originators of your attachment wounds. They're your first relationships. And naturally they're human, whether your parents did a great job, but they're human and, life happened, unpredictable things, or whether you did experience some neglect or even some abuse. Either way, our original wounds were created in relationship with our families, and particularly with mom and dad as kind of the most potent, creators of these wounds, because they're our first connections and we are totally dependent on them. So we can have things that come up from like siblings too, but you're in most families, you're very dependent on mom or dad or grandma, whoever, to meet your needs for survival. And so the ways that they have hurt you, the ways that they let you down, it created these ruptures. And when you feel really intensely about someone or with someone, it's that that person feels similar to how you felt with mom and dad or grandma or whoever. And it feels like if you can get this person in front of you now to change or to choose you, it will make up for all the ways that your parents didn't. Okay, it will prove for once and for all that you are enough, that you are worthy, that you didn't deserve what happened to you, that you did deserve the kind of love and, love and acceptance that you couldn't get from mom and dad. So you're drawn to these people on this subconscious level, maybe these inconsistent people, these situationships, all with the goal of healing those core wounds. It's a subconscious goal. You're not like consciously, I think I want to go choose that person who makes me feel terrible about myself. No, nobody's out here doing that consciously. So I hope that gives you like a bit of, an invitation for self-forgiveness there, that you're not just trying to choose people who stress you out. Okay. It's a very unconscious pattern that's happening. And the truth is, choosing these inconsistent people is not really how the healing happens. It's not through them. The healing actually happens through meeting yourself in those moments and through no longer outsourcing your sense of self to that other person. Okay, so the healing doesn't really happen in these toxic relationships, even though that's the subconscious goal. The healing happens when we choose out of them and start choosing ourselves. It happens when we work on healing that inner child. It happens when we work on the nervous system level, and so many other pieces that kind of go into this process. And then it also happens through choosing healthier partners. Okay, through choosing the consistent partners, choosing the partners who respect you, who value you, because then that gives you a new experience in relationships. So the healing doesn't happen through repeating the same cycle over and over again. That creates deeper wounds. The healing happens through choosing into these healthier relationships where you're like, oh, somebody can stay. Oh, somebody can take accountability. Somebody can actually choose me without me doing all these things to try to prove myself, without me jumping through all these hoops. And so when you stay with these people who are inconsistent, it not only deepens your wounds, but part of that is it gives you more anxiety. It conditions you to think that you deserve less, to think that this behavior is okay. And ultimately, it wastes a lot of your time and prevents you from being available for someone who can commit to you. Okay, it prevents you from being with someone who wants to get married, who wants to have a family, who maybe you just want a relationship that's long term and committed, whatever that is. If you're in a situationship that is not aligned with your long term goals, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm not getting any younger. And while we can't control the timing that we meet our person, that we, find our future husband, we can control when we're on a totally opposite path of what's going to get there. Okay, so like being in a situationship is not going to take you towards that path. It's a massive detour. And so we want to really take ownership for that. Like some of you might have been in your situationships for quite some time. And you need to be honest with yourself, as difficult as it may be to leave. Where are you going to be a year from now if you stay in this? Where are you going to be 5 years from now? Where are you going to be 10? Okay, like at some point there has to be a change, and you have to make that decision within yourself that you're ready to let go and want to actually set yourself up for the relationship that you know you deserve. And if you see yourself in any of these examples, I would highly recommend joining Unsituationshipable. This is a new 5-week live coaching program that's going to help you let go of your situationship for good. Move on without all the ruminating, spiraling, or wondering why he wouldn't choose you, and stop repeating the same pattern with these men who are emotionally unavailable. And we're also going to talk about a lot of the practicals and, the healing work that's necessary to help you attract men who are ready for commitment. So if you're in that place where you're like, I need to close the door here, but I need some support, I need some accountability, this would be a great fit for you. Or if you are someone who you've already closed the door, you've maybe cut contact, but you find yourself thinking about this person and really ruminating, and you still don't feel like you're actually able to be open to new connections with healthy people. Maybe that connection is still kind of on a pedestal in your mind. This is also a great program for you. And this program, it's like a 5 weeks, and it's super what's the word? Super economical. This is only $199 for this program through April 15th. So I would highly recommend taking advantage of that, especially if you've been listening and you've been like wanting to work with me for a while, but you're like, haven't been able to make a bigger investment into some of my other programs. This might be a really good one for you. And it's going to be a blast. You'll be in it with, me and like a handful of other women who are also going through the same situation ship. I'm sorry, that was so bad. And so we're going to get you on the right track. Okay. Now, I also want to talk about some fears that may keep you in situationships as well. Oh, by the way, the program, the show notes has the link for that where you can register and read more information. We start the end of April, by the way. So, some of these other fears. Some of you may have some more avoidant core fears popping up that make this sort of dynamic feel more comfortable than one that is committed, than one that is consistent. And so you might actually be sabotaging your chances of finding the relationship you truly want because some of these fears aren't playing such a large role. And I mean, don't get me wrong, all the other examples we talked about before, those other fears are also sabotage. But here's some other ones that you might not really think about, especially if you just kind of feel like you're good in your situationship. You're like, is it really that bad? I don't know. There may actually be a subconscious fear kind of keeping you in this dynamic. And we're going to talk about some of those. So another sip of water. Okay, so the first one, and these are really common if you've been in not so great relationships. These are really common if you are more the fearful avoidant type. Um, but you could have some of these in smaller ways, even if you don't identify with that fearful avoidant attachment style. But these are some of the big ones. So the first one is the fear of being trapped in a bad relationship. So I think sometimes we talk about like the fear of commitment, but I think the fear of commitment often is more like the fear of ending up in a bad relationship, ending up in a relationship where the person suddenly changes on you, or like a fear of committing to the wrong person. And if you had codependent relationships in the past or like in your family where you felt suffocated, smothered, controlled, like you didn't have your own autonomy, maybe you were even abused, then the lack of commitment might actually feel like freedom and like safety. Okay. If you're afraid that the relationship itself is going to hurt you or be bad, it feels like, okay, I don't want to be in something committed because then I don't have an out and I can't make sure that I'm safe if I don't have that out. But this is actually swinging from one extreme to the other, which is really common when we have trauma in a particular area. We go to the other extreme rather than what is the healthy middle. We see things more in a black and white way. So if you're wanting a committed relationship, you actually need to learn to work through some of those avoidant triggers that make you feel like closeness is scary or like you're going to get hurt. And the like defense mechanism here or the survival strategy is basically like I have to get away in order to feel safe. But when you develop secure relationship skills, you can actually help yourself feel safe in connection too. And that might be some things like learning to set boundaries, learning what your needs actually are. learning how to communicate those, and learning how to vet for whether someone's a healthy partner so that you don't choose people who are actually hurtful towards you, who are harmful towards you. And that also allows you to trust yourself again to, pick healthier partners. And if you're resonating with any of these, I mean, number one, the situationship program is going to be awesome for you. But I would also highly recommend looking into my one-on-one program, Attachment Alchemy, because we cover all of these secure relationship facets in that program. And I have a ton of stories of other women who have come from really similar experiences and then gone on to find healthy relationships. And they were sort of, sabotaging relationships in this way because it didn't feel safe. Maybe they would run, or maybe they were constantly choosing the guys who weren't emotionally available or who were non-committal because they didn't know that that actually felt safer than getting trapped in a relationship where, that person might hurt you. Okay. That's like the fear, right? So number two is, and I lumped a bunch of these together, fear of vulnerability or fear of rejection, fear of being seen, fear of intimacy. So it's basically like this fear that if someone actually knows you and sees you, then they are going to hurt you or reject you. So you may subconsciously associate that closeness and that person knowing you deeply with pain or rejection. And maybe vulnerability was something that was used against you growing up in your family or in past relationships. Maybe sharing your feelings wasn't something that people did in your family, or maybe if you did, you were like teased. Maybe you were ignored. Maybe you were punished if like it was the whole thing that people would say, like, if you cry, like I'll give you something to cry about, right? Maybe you were punished for having an emotional reaction, which is actually just super normal and human. Maybe your parents or whoever was in your family just didn't know how to respond to emotions or to vulnerability because they didn't have that modeled for them. And so there wasn't this curiosity or this desire or this safety around vulnerability. There wasn't this, they call it like approach-oriented behaviors where your parent is like coming towards you and wanting to get to know you on a deeper level and not to use it against you, but simply because they delight in you. They want to know like the way that you see the world, the way that you think about things. There's like a beauty in that, and excitement when you have like a secure attachment figure, just like a healthier parent, where it's like they feel excited and just this joy about like you and who you are, and just like marvel at this little person who has these tiny fingers and has this whole experience in the world that might be different from like their experience. And so there is a like a welcoming and an excitement about like, who are you? Like I want to know you. And so you might not have experienced that because that wasn't something that maybe your parents were ever shown or ever given. And so when you have been neglected on an emotional level, when you've been deprived of emotional intimacy, your child brain actually takes that experience and internalizes it. Your little brain says, "Oh, this means something's wrong with me." Actually, because I was rejected in this moment, it means I'm too much. It means I'm bad. It means I'm unlovable. It means there's something wrong with me. And it creates these intense feelings of shame. And so shame makes you hide parts of yourself, the parts of you that led to rejection, the parts of you that weren't welcomed, that weren't celebrated. And you were actually just expressing a very normal human part of yourself that those people didn't know how to respond appropriately to. And so these parts of you aren't bad or wrong or too much, they're just human. But your body doesn't recognize that. it instead feels the deep pain and fear that comes up or that came up in those moments. It remembers the rejection. And so your body, your nervous system, your attachment system, it will do its best to keep you from re-experiencing that same pain. It's trying to protect you from going through that again. But sometimes it does too good, in quotes, too good of a job and actually keeps you from basically any relationship, even healthy ones. It doesn't know that, okay, it was just those kinds of people that weren't safe to open up to. Instead, the way that, trauma impacts us is again, we go to the extremes where your brain is like, oh, actually, no one is safe. No one is safe to open up to. No, it's not safe to be vulnerable with anyone. And so we actually need healthy relationships, though, to to help us heal these wounds. We need to be able to be open again to people. We need to be able to um, let people in so that we can experience a different, healthier outcome. And these wounds that you have can be one of the things that keeps you in relationships that don't require you to open up, right? The casual, non-committed relationship that feels safer because you're never really experiencing true vulnerability or true closeness. You're kind of getting, maybe you're getting like physical intimacy. So you're getting the need kind of met, but you're not actually getting what a healthy relationship would offer you, which includes emotional safety and emotional intimacy. And the last one that we're talking about is the fear of being let down or being disappointed, right? Kind of fear of being hurt, similar. Um, and this is often called like the trust wound. You could maybe see it like as a betrayal wound too. And it's basically if I actually rely on people, if I actually trust you, if I actually drop my guard, you're going to let me down. Okay. It's like I can't have any hope because it's not going to work out the way I want to. It's this feeling of why bother? Why risk it? It's not worth it because people just let me down. So instead, you become hyper independent and you never rely on other people. But the truth is, that's again also a reaction from trauma. It's just a survival mechanism. And that life is really lonely and exhausting. And while people will never be 100% safe or trustworthy 100% of the time, simply because we're human. Okay, it's not a possibility even for us to be 100% safe or 100% trustworthy, 100% dependable. But there are people who are safe enough and there are people who are trustworthy enough. And healing happens when we start to let those safe enough people in and when we learn to heal our own wounds, kind of doing that work internally with ourselves around this so that we're not placing such an expectation of perfection on other people because we desperately need them to not let us down. Okay, if you desperately need someone to show up for you, that's showing you that you have a wound there. Okay, if there's that intensity of emotion. And once again, if you see yourself in these last three examples, the unsituationshipable program would be great. And if you want to do deeper work around some of these trust wounds, attachment alchemy would be a really good fit for you. And you can read more in the show notes and also DM me if you have any questions about either of these programs on Instagram. And like I said, if you're trying to in your situationship, trying to get over one, Unsituationshipable starts the end of this month, and I would love to see you guys inside. This is going to be a great launching pad to help you rip off the band-aid and align yourself with the type of men that can actually give you what you want. Okay. Let's just call it quits. Let's be done with it. I know it's hard, but it's worth it in order to get to the other side because you don't even know how much better relationships can be when you have these like rose-colored glasses on or when you have the dopamine goggles on. It feels like this is the best thing, and I promise you it's not. Like if it feels this quote unquote good, being with someone who only halfway shows up and halfway meets your needs, imagine how much better it would feel with someone who can fully meet your needs and fully show up for you and fully wants to commit to you and choose you without you having to prove yourself or strive so hard. Like there are guys out there who will actually reciprocate and meet you in the middle and who aren't afraid of commitment. And they're looking for someone just like you. You just have to get out of your own way in this. Okay. So you can register for the link in the show notes. Don't miss the early bird pricing, the 199. It ends on April 15th. And I will catch you guys on the next episode. Until then, I'm wishing you lots of luck and love on your journey towards becoming more secure. Bye.